I never thought I'd become that man, the kind who hides in shadows, who plants devices in his own home, who studies his wife's movements like a stranger trying to crack a code. I never thought the word husband could feel so hollow when paired with betrayal. But here I am, telling my story. For reasons that will become obvious, I won't share my real name. Think of me as just another husband, another man who loved, trusted, and gave everything, only to discover that love can be nothing more than a mask. My wife, let's call her Clara. She was the kind of woman people noticed when she walked into a room. Confident, graceful, and sharp enough to make any man feel slightly smaller in her presence. I married her because she made me believe I had won life's grand lottery. For years, I thought I had. But then came the whispers. It didn't start with a scream or a fight, but with something far more subtle, a shift. The kind you feel in your gut before your mind can process it. Clara's phone, once carelessly left on counters and couches, was now glued to her hand. Her laughter changed, lighter, too frequent, as if someone unseen was feeding her lines through a secret channel. And when she kissed me, it felt mechanical, like checking a box on some marital to-do list. I told myself I was imagining it. That's what love does, it convinces you to doubt your instincts, even when those instincts are clawing at your chest. But when she started working late too often, coming home with excuses as flimsy as tissue paper, I knew. Deep down, I knew. The hardest part wasn't the suspicion, it was the silence. I couldn't confront her without proof. Clara was too clever, too controlled. She would deny, twist, turn it back on me, maybe even laugh. And I couldn't bear the thought of being painted as paranoid. So, I did what I swore I'd never do. I became the spy in my own marriage. It started with a simple decision. I bought a small audio recorder. Sleek, black, no bigger than a lighter, and almost impossible to detect. I slipped it under the passenger seat of her car, where she'd never look. My hands trembled as I placed it there, my reflection staring back at me from the glossy paint of her sedan. My heart hammered so hard I could barely breathe. I told myself this was just precaution, just to put my doubts to rest. But the truth? I wanted blood. That first night was torture. Clara came home late, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers, something sweeter, sharper, the kind of fragrance women wear to seduce. She kissed me on the cheek, tossed her bag on the counter, and acted as though nothing was wrong. I barely heard her words. My mind was already in the car, waiting for her lies to be replayed in tinny audio. I told no one. Not friends, not family. This was my private hell, and I guarded it fiercely. By day, I played the role of husband, smiling, nodding, pretending. By night, I became the archivist of my own destruction. And with every file, every secret clip, the man I once was began to fade. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a witness. A witness to the slow, brutal death of love. And it was only the beginning. By the second week, I was no longer the same man who had first slipped that recorder under Clara's car seat. Something inside me had changed, something I didn't recognize. I had always seen myself as steady, rational, dependable. But now, when I looked in the mirror, I saw hollow eyes and clenched teeth. I was becoming a shadow of myself, and the worst part was, I welcomed it. Because shadows could hide. Clara still kissed me good morning. She still asked about my day. She still smiled as if nothing had shifted in the air between us. But behind those smiles, I saw her lies. I knew, with painful clarity, that every time her phone buzzed, it wasn't work, it was him. Every time she lingered in the shower, it wasn't exhaustion, it was her covering her tracks. And me? I played along. I laughed at her jokes, I touched her hand, I pretended to be the husband she thought I was. But inside, I was listening, watching, cataloging. Every little slip of her voice became evidence. Every glance at her screen became confirmation. I was the ghost in my own marriage. The recordings piled up. I created folders on my laptop, labeled by date, by place, even by level of betrayal. At first, I thought it would hurt less over time, that I would grow numb to the sting of her laughter with Daniel, the sound of her voice lowered to a sultry whisper. But it didn't. Each new file carved deeper wounds, scars stacked on scars until I was raw beneath the surface. What fascinated me most, what made me hate myself, was how ordinary it all seemed to her. She didn't treat it like a crime, like something shameful or dangerous. No, she carried her affair like a second skin. Effortless. Natural. As though betrayal was part of her daily routine, like brushing her teeth or sipping coffee. And me? I was just the backdrop. The man she came home to, smiled at, and tucked into bed. But the real Clara? The woman she became in secret? She saved that for him. I remember one particular night. She told me she had a late meeting. My stomach twisted when she kissed my cheek before leaving. I knew. God, I knew. And yet I smiled, told her to drive safe, like some fool auditioning for the role of a clueless husband in a bad play. Hours later, I sat in the dark with my laptop open, the camera feed flickering on the screen. I had hidden a small device in her car, tiny, nearly invisible, and there she was. Not my wife. Not the woman I had married. But a stranger. It hit me then, with brutal clarity, I wasn't just losing her body. I was losing her heart. And for the first time, I realized the recordings might not save me. They might destroy me completely. By the time the 4th month rolled around, I had hundreds of hours of recordings. Audio files, camera footage, mirrored text messages, all stored neatly in folders across my hard drive. At first, they had been proof, insurance in case I ever chose to confront Clara. But now, they had become something else entirely. They were my prison. I would sit for hours, watching the same clips over and over again. Clara's laughter with Daniel. Her whispered promises. The way her voice softened when she said his name. It was masochistic, self-destructive, but I couldn't stop. Because every time I hit play, I wasn't just hearing betrayal, I was hearing the death of my marriage. And somehow, replaying that death gave me a twisted sense of control. But control is an illusion. One night, I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. Hollow eyes, gaunt cheeks, lips pressed thin. I looked like a stranger. I realized then that while Clara had been living 2 lives, so had I. She had Daniel, and I had my secret recordings. She had passion, and I had obsession. She was alive, and I was slowly dying. That night, I nearly smashed the laptop. Nearly. My fists hovered above it, trembling with rage. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because deep down, I wasn't ready to let go. And that's when the truth hit me harder than any recording ever had. I wasn't staying because I loved her. I was staying because I couldn't imagine myself without her. That realization broke me more than her affair ever could. For weeks, I kept up the charade. Smiling, nodding, playing the role of the clueless husband. Clara carried on as if everything was normal, sneaking away when she thought I wasn't watching, spinning lies so casually I almost admired her for it. But inside, I was unraveling. I started to wonder what would happen if I confronted her. Would she cry? Deny? Leave? Would she run into Daniel's arms without hesitation? I pictured it over and over, the confrontation, the fallout. And every version ended with me alone. So I stayed silent. I let her believe I was blind. I let her think she was winning some secret game. And every night, when she drifted off beside me, I sat in the dark with my headphones on, listening to her second life play out in tinny audio. It became my ritual. My punishment. And maybe my salvation. Because here's the truth, telling her would have set her free. Confronting her would have forced her to choose. And I wasn't ready for that choice. So I chose silence. But silence doesn't erase pain. It only buries it deeper. That's why I'm here now, writing this, confessing to strangers instead of to her. Because I need someone to know. I need someone to hear what I've carried alone for months. Her hair done differently, makeup touched up in ways she didn't bother for me anymore. She sat in the driver's seat, waiting. And then he appeared, Daniel. He slid into the passenger side with a grin that made bile rise in my throat. He leaned in, kissed her deeply, hungrily, like a man who had every right to her. And she let him. No hesitation. No guilt. That night, I watched them drive to a motel. A cheap one. My chest tightened as I saw them disappear into a room, her hand linked with his. The feed cut off after a while, but my imagination filled in the blanks. I didn't need audio to know what was happening between those walls. I sat there, paralyzed. Some men would have stormed out, followed them, dragged her back home. Others would have called the police, called family, created a scene. Me? I sat and watched. Because I wasn't ready for it to end. Not yet. That's when I realized the recordings weren't just about proof anymore. They had become an addiction. Like pressing on a bruise, even when you know it'll hurt. I needed to see, to hear, to witness. Each file was a fresh knife wound, but I couldn't stop collecting them. I couldn't stop replaying them in my head. Maybe it was punishment. Maybe it was masochism. Or maybe it was control, the only kind of control I had left. Because in those moments, hidden behind screens and speakers, I knew everything. I was the god of this twisted little world. Clara thought she was keeping secrets, but I held them all in my hands. Still, knowledge didn't make me strong. It made me hollow. I began to change in ways Clara didn't notice, though others might have. At work, I was distracted, barely holding conversations. At night, I found excuses to stay awake longer, waiting for her to fall asleep so I could review the day's recordings. Sleep itself became a stranger, my dreams haunted by her voice calling his name. And then, one night, I caught something different. Not passion. Not laughter. But plans. I heard Clara telling Daniel about a weekend trip. Somewhere by the coast. A getaway, just the two of them. My stomach dropped as she described the hotel, the room, how she'd tell me she was going to visit an old friend. It wasn't just sex anymore. It was escalation. And that terrified me more than anything. Because suddenly, it wasn't just about the thrill of sneaking around, it was about building a second life. A parallel existence where I didn't even factor in. For the first time since starting the recordings, I felt something stronger than pain. I felt fear. What if she left me? What if one day she didn't come home at all? What if I became nothing more than the husband she once had, the man she discarded like an old coat when something shinier came along? That thought chilled me. And yet, I didn't stop recording. When she finally fell asleep, I slipped outside, retrieved the recorder, and plugged it into my laptop. My palms were slick with sweat as the file loaded. Static. The hum of the engine. Clara humming along to a song. For a moment, relief washed over me. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe love was intact after all. And then I heard it. A man's voice. Deep. Confident. Too comfortable. "Missed you," he said, casual as if speaking to a lover of years. Clara laughed. That laugh, the one she hadn't shared with me in months. "You're going to get me in trouble," she teased. My vision blurred. My own wife, talking like that. I felt my chest cave in, my stomach twist with rage and nausea. I wanted to scream, to smash the laptop against the wall, to wake her and demand answers. But instead, I pressed play again. And again. Every word, every giggle, Every stolen whisper burned into me like acid. The man, let's call him Daniel, spoke with the ease of someone who had been there long enough to stop pretending. He joked about places they could meet, about the thrill of sneaking around. Clara responded like a teenager discovering love for the first time. Her voice was lighter, younger, dripping with a kind of passion I hadn't heard from her in years. It gutted me. But it also hooked me. Proof wasn't enough. No, I wanted the whole story. I wanted to know everything, the when, the where, the how often. If my marriage was going to die, then I would be the one to write its obituary in full detail. That's when the recordings became my obsession. I upgraded. Hidden cameras, motion sensors, even spyware on her phone. I became the ghost in my own house, the invisible audience to Clara's secret world. She had no idea. To her, I was still the husband who kissed her goodnight, who asked about her day, who played the fool while she played me. But every night, when she drifted off, I sat in front of my laptop with headphones pressed tight, listening. Watching. Collecting. Each new recording peeled back another layer. Sometimes it was simple flirting in the car. Sometimes it was phone calls whispered in bathrooms when she thought I wasn't listening. And sometimes it was worse. The first time I heard them together, really together, I nearly vomited. Her moans, once mine, were now his soundtrack. The way she whispered his name with a desperation she had long denied me. I sat in the dark, fists clenched, tears burning down my face, forcing myself to endure every second. It was a nightmare I couldn't wake from. But I kept pressing record. Why? Because I wasn't ready to let go. Because a sick part of me wanted to understand what she had that I didn't. Because if she was going to bury our marriage, I wanted to stand at the grave with every detail etched into my soul. Every sigh, every silence, every fake smile I gave her, it was all part of the archive. Proof of a man who had once loved deeply, now reduced to a spy, a witness, a ghost. And though I hated it, I couldn't stop. Because some part of me believed that if I kept recording, if I kept gathering every shred of evidence, I would eventually find the answer to the question that haunted me most. Why? Why wasn't I enough? By the time Clara's weekend with Daniel was behind us, I was no longer the man I used to be. The recordings had changed me, reshaped me into something raw, brittle, almost unrecognizable. I lived in two worlds now, the surface one, where I was still her husband, and the hidden one, where I was her ghost, her unseen audience, her archivist of betrayal. But living in two worlds comes with a cost. The cracks began to show. At work, I missed deadlines. Coworkers asked if I was okay, I brushed them off with excuses about not sleeping well. At home, I drifted in and out of conversations with Clara, barely catching her words. She would laugh about something on TV, and I would stare blankly, hearing instead the sound of Daniel's voice in my head. The worst part was that Clara didn't notice. Or maybe she chose not to. Her phone still buzzed at odd hours, her excuses still flowed as smoothly as rehearsed lines in a play. And me? I sat in the audience, clapping silently, while inside I was bleeding. But then, something unexpected happened. One evening, as I was reviewing a recording from her purse, I heard a different tone in Daniel's voice. It wasn't playful or seductive, it was serious. "We can't keep doing this forever," he said. Clara's response was a soft sigh. "I know." Those two words froze me. Because I didn't know if she meant she was ready to end it, or ready to take the next step. I leaned closer to the speaker, desperate for more. Daniel continued, "I don't want to sneak around anymore. You deserve more than lies. I want to wake up next to you every day, not just in stolen hours." My chest tightened, my breath shallow. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was ambition. Daniel wasn't content being the shadow lover. He wanted to replace me. Clara didn't shut him down. She didn't laugh it off. Instead, she whispered, "We have to be careful. He suspects nothing. He suspects nothing." The words hit like a punch. I almost laughed. If only she knew, if only she could see the files, the folders, the hundreds of hours of her life archived on my laptop. But then another thought struck me. She was planning a future with him. A real one. The ground beneath me shifted. The recordings weren't just voyeuristic torment anymore, they were warnings. Signs that my marriage was circling the drain faster than I'd allowed myself to admit. For the first time since this nightmare began, I asked myself, what if she actually leaves me? Because if she was going to destroy me, then I wanted to burn with the full truth. Saturday was worse. They spent the day outside, walking the shoreline, eating at cafes, laughing like newlyweds. I saw the photos she sent me later, selfies with Emily, carefully staged lies. But on my mirrored screen, I saw the truth, no Emily, just Daniel's hand brushing against hers, his lips at her ear. The recordings told me even more. How they spoke of someday, of trips they wanted to take, of fantasies they hadn't yet lived. Daniel spoke of whisking her away, of building something beyond hotel rooms and hurried kisses. And Clara? She didn't say no. That's what gutted me most, not the sex, not the lies, but the possibility that she might actually leave me. Because up until then, I had consoled myself with the idea that I was still her anchor. That no matter how wild her affair became, she would come back to me. That I was still her husband, her safety net, her home. But listening to her with Daniel, I realized I wasn't even that anymore. I was a placeholder. A body she lived beside until she could escape into the arms of the man she really wanted. Saturday night was brutal. The recorder didn't miss a second. Hours of passion, of whispered words, of Clara becoming someone I didn't know. She was free with him in ways she had never been with me. She begged, she teased, she surrendered completely. And me? I sat in silence, tears streaming down my face, fists pounding against the armrest of my chair. Rage, humiliation, despair, it all mixed together until I was numb. At one point, I even spoke out loud to the empty room, "She's not yours. She's my wife." But the words felt hollow, meaningless. Because in that hotel room, she wasn't mine. She hadn't been mine for a long time. By Sunday, I was drained. Sleep deprived, emotionally wrecked, barely holding myself together. I listened as they checked out, as Clara rehearsed her lie for me. "It was such a good trip," she said to Daniel with a laugh. "I'll have to tell him all about Emily's drama." And then she drove home. I sat waiting when she walked through the door, suitcase rolling behind her, smile plastered across her face. She hugged me, kissed my cheek, and launched into her rehearsed story. I nodded, asked questions, played the role of supportive husband. But inside, I was screaming. Because as she spoke, I could still hear the echoes of her weekend. The lies weren't just words, they were ghosts, hovering in every corner of the room, reminding me of what she had done. That night, lying beside her in bed, I stared at the ceiling and realized something terrifying. I wasn't just recording her anymore. I was recording myself. If anything, I doubled down. I planted another device in her purse. I found a way to mirror her text messages onto my phone. Every ding, every buzz became a reminder that I was still in the game, still watching. I had become obsessed. And the scariest part? I didn't want to stop. Because as long as I kept recording, I still had her. Even if she didn't know it. Even if she wasn't truly mine anymore. I had her secrets. And secrets, I was learning, were sometimes more intimate than love itself. The plan unfolded exactly as Clara described it. She told me on a Thursday evening, her tone casual, rehearsed. "I'm going to visit Emily this weekend," she said, referring to a college friend I hadn't seen in years. She added just enough detail to make it believable, how Emily had been going through a rough patch, how she needed a girl's weekend away. I smiled. I even offered to help her pack. But inside, I was burning. I knew the truth. I had heard her whisper it to Daniel, her voice trembling with excitement like a teenager sneaking out for the first time. And now, I was about to watch my wife spend an entire weekend belonging to another man. By Friday afternoon, Clara kissed me goodbye at the door, suitcase in hand, perfume trailing after her like a signature. I hugged her longer than usual, not out of love, but out of desperation. Part of me wanted to beg her not to go, to confess that I knew everything. But the other part, the darker part, wanted the evidence. The story. The complete unraveling of what she thought she could keep hidden. When she drove away, I didn't follow. I didn't need to. My devices did the chasing for me. Her phone mirrored on my screen. Her car tracked by GPS. Her purse carrying a recorder no bigger than a coin. Every step she took that weekend, I took with her, silently, invisibly. And that's how I watched my marriage die in real time. The first night, they checked into a hotel by the coast. Not luxurious, but not cheap either. A place designed for couples who wanted privacy, seclusion. The kind of place where passion could burn unchecked. Through the recorder, I heard everything. The sound of the door clicking shut. Clara's laughter, nervous at first, then melting into something raw and hungry. The scrape of a zipper, the thud of a suitcase tossed aside. And then, the sounds I dreaded most. Her voice. Her moans. The way she said his name like it was a prayer, like it was the only word she had ever learned. I sat in my living room, headphones pressed so tight against my skull they left marks. My hands shook, my teeth ground together until my jaw ached. Every sound was a blade carving me open, yet I couldn't pull away. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was compulsion. I needed to hear it all. I needed to know the depth of her betrayal, every gasp, every whisper, every stolen, "I love you," that wasn't meant for me. I had spent weeks obsessing over betrayal, but I had never truly imagined the aftermath. What would my life look like without her? Empty rooms, silent dinners, holidays alone. The thought chilled me more than the affair itself. And that's when darker thoughts crept in. What if I confronted Daniel instead? I found myself fantasizing about it. Cornering him in some parking lot, shoving a folder of photos and recordings in his face. Telling him to back off, to leave my wife alone. The thought gave me a flicker of power, a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. But another part of me, the angrier, vengeful part, imagined something worse. Following him. Exposing him. Destroying him the way he was destroying me. I didn't recognize myself anymore. The man I used to be wouldn't have thought of revenge. He would have confronted his wife, demanded the truth, walked away with his dignity intact. But now I was drunk on knowledge. Every recording was fuel, every secret I uncovered was both poison and power. And the addiction grew. I installed another hidden camera, this time in our bedroom. Not because I thought she would bring Daniel here, she wasn't that reckless, but because I wanted to capture the in-between moments. The way she looked at her phone when she thought I wasn't watching. The little smiles that weren't meant for me. I was cataloging not just her betrayal, but her absence. The proof that even when she was physically beside me, she belonged elsewhere. But the more I recorded, the more careless I became. One night, Clara nearly caught me. I was in the garage, downloading files from her car recorder, when she appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing out here?" she asked, her tone casual but curious. My heart stopped. I forced a smile, holding up an old toolbox as if it were evidence. "Fixing the lock on the shed," I lied. She squinted at me for a moment, then nodded and walked away. I collapsed against the wall, sweat pouring down my back. That was too close. And yet, the near miss didn't stop me. If anything, it thrilled me. There was something intoxicating about dancing so close to the edge, about knowing I could be caught at any moment. It made me feel alive in a way nothing else did anymore. But that adrenaline came with a cost. My obsession was consuming me, and I knew it. I stopped eating properly. I barely slept. My life became a cycle of waiting for her to leave, downloading files, listening, watching, cataloging. I wasn't living anymore. I was surviving. And then came the moment that nearly broke me. Another recording, another night of Clara with Daniel. But this time, it wasn't passion that destroyed me, it was tenderness. Do you ever think about us in the future? Daniel asked. And Clara, my wife, whispered back, every day. I ripped the headphones off, my chest heaving. That was worse than sex, worse than lies. That was love. Or at least, the illusion of it. I need someone to understand what it feels like to watch your marriage disintegrate from the shadows, to know every detail of your wife's betrayal and still kiss her goodnight. I need someone to understand why I stayed. Not because I forgave her. Not because I was strong. But because I was weak. Because I couldn't let go. Even now, as I write this, Clara is in the other room, texting someone. I don't have to check to know who it is. The phone buzzes, she smiles, and I die a little more inside. And tomorrow, I'll keep pretending. Because that's who I am now, a man who records, a man who knows, a man who says nothing. A ghost in his own life. And maybe that's the cruelest part of all, not that she betrayed me, but that I let her. That I chose silence over freedom. That I chose to haunt myself. So here's my confession, to whoever reads this. I secretly recorded my wife's affair for weeks. I know everything. And I'll never say a word. This story takes you deep into the hidden world of a husband who became a ghost in his own marriage. For weeks, he secretly recorded his wife's affair, collecting every laugh, every whisper, every lie. What started as suspicion became obsession. He watched her fall in love with another man, heard her promises, and witnessed her betrayal in real time. But instead of exposing her, he stayed silent. His silence was not strength, it was survival. By keeping her secret, he kept himself in the shadows, a prisoner of his own recordings. This is not just a story about infidelity, it's a story about obsession, weakness, and the haunting power of knowing too much. Disclaimer. This story is a true infidelity confession shared anonymously for storytelling purposes. All names and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy. The goal of this content is to educate, entertain, and spark conversation about relationships, trust, and betrayal. Viewer discretion is advised, as this story is intended for a mature audience only. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more shocking true stories and confessions in 2025. Infidelity stories are never just about sex, they're about the slow unraveling of trust, the quiet moments when love turns into lies, and the unbearable silence of the betrayed. This husband chose not to confront, but to confess anonymously, reminding us that sometimes the most painful secrets are the ones that stay hidden. If this story gripped you, remember, there are many more true tales of betrayal, secrets, and raw emotions coming your way. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and stay tuned for more shocking true infidelity stories that will leave you questioning everything about love, loyalty, and trust.